said, well, before I say yes, I shall have to discuss this with my wife. And she was all for it. She said if it means a few extra bob for us, yes. And it was for 3 months, a 3-month contract. Well, this company that I was going to was a cable making company making electric cable, and they were making aluminium electric cables for use in the mountains because it was lighter to carry, lighter to transport and lighter to fix. I went out on the plane. The first time I did flown long distance, I think, was Comet 4. The silent jet, they called it. It's a beautiful aircraft. And so it was a zigzag sort of flight because we were taking school children out to their diplomatic parents for school holidays. So we first stop was Frankfurt, and we weren't allowed to get off the plane at Frankfurt, and then we went to Beirut to Karachi to Calcutta, which was my final destination. And we had fun there because I came off the plane and I'd been in such a hurry that they hadn't been able to arrange accommodation for me. But then a days, when you were going into another country, you had to fill in an immigration card. It was your name and address and this and that, and country of origin, and then you had to state your place of occupation when you were in the country. And I couldn't give a name of any hotel or residence where I was going to stay, so they wouldn't let me in. So I was supposed to have had a Mr. Lewis and a Swiss guy, I forget his name now. They were supposed to meet me off the plane, you see, and they were late. So they put me in a little office, and then all sorts of things went through my mind, the dark hole of Calcutta. I thought, well, this is a nice situation to find yourself in. Anyway, after about 3/4 of an hour, they arrived, all full of apologies and this and that, the other, and then they eventually went through my baggage and let me in. And I landed up at the hotel somewhere in the region of about 12:15. And then I was ready for bed. And the factory was, if I remember rightly, it was 176 Jessel Road, Calcutta, down by the airport, Dum Dum. And I went and saw the plant. They had got it partly in production, and looked at it, and there was one man was my blessing, and he was a Sikh, and he was the foreman, or going to be the foreman of this place. But he'd been in the English army, in the Indian army, so he spoke English. He was the only man on that plant that spoke English. Lunchtime came and they said, we're going to lunch now. So we went down to what was supposedly their canteen. And it was a big umbrella, 5 times bigger than that, and sitting out on the concrete. And they were eating, dipping into the big bowl, communal bowl round, and they had the chapatis, and they were dipping in and I couldn't do that. They said, you're not eating. I said, no, that's not my way. I said to this Sikh foreman, I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, we'll arrange some other way. Anyway, when I got back to the hotel, I spoke to the manager of the hotel about it, and he said, we'll make you sandwiches. So we took sandwiches. They were extruding this rod, and it was coming out at something like 500C, and they were having wet bags to hold it, to coil it. It was really pathetic. So I could see I'd got a big job on to set the thing up. So the first things first was to cool the rod after it was extruded. I designed a box that was fed with from a water supply, and it built up at a height of water of about 7-8 inches, that the rod went through cold water, completely cold water, because it was constant flowing, and it cooled the rod, and then they could handle it without any wet bags and things like that to hold it down. But I was amazed at the way they went about the job, because I told the boss man what was wanted, and he brought the carpenter to me, and I explained to the carpenter, well, tried to, the Sikh man explained what I was saying, and yes, and he went away, and the next day he came back with as much wood as he could carry, and it was planks about that big, like that, and he made a box, and he did it on the floor. He didn't have a bench. He had his 1 or 2 bits of very basic tools, and he made the box to my satisfaction, and in a day and a half he got it ready. And then of course the pipe fitters had to come in and put a supply of water and things like that on. So that happened, and eventually we got the quench box on, and that was what it was known as, a quench box. And then the boys at the other end that were coiling this rod were over the moon, because they were no longer handling hot metal, and so that was the thing, and then we could speed the production up. Instead of creeping out of the thing, we could full speed, and that pleased the boss man. Oh, after 8 weeks, things were going quite nicely, and the boss man come along to me and said, well now, Mr. Hillman, his name was Mr. Nars, I think it was. He's a multi-engineer, a millionaire, and he had a cable making plant, he had the pressure die casting plant, all on the same site, and he was a rich man. And he came to me and he said, well now, part of your contract, he said, we've got to send you on a week's holiday. Where would you like to go? I said, I haven't a clue. I said, I've only been here a few weeks and I don't know the country, I haven't a clue about the country. Well, he said, go back to your hotel and discuss it with Mr. Lewis. So I went back and I phoned Peter and I told him what was going on, and he said, oh, that's handy, he said. My wife Betty and I and the kids, we're going up to Darjeeling. He said, for a week's holiday. He said, next weekend, get him to book you a flight and a hotel and have a week in Darjeeling with us, which was nice, you know. Anyway, we got to Darjeeling, and then the hotel had made a mistake and I hadn't got a room. Oh, what we're going to do, what we're going to do. Anyway, it finished up. I was going to have bed and breakfast with a widow lady. It was the widow of a tea planter. Strangely enough, I'll never ever forget her name. It was Annie Oakley. And so she gave me a bed and breakfast, and it was lovely. It was nice. I liked it. I liked it better than a hotel. It wasn't so formal. And so that went well. And then we went up into the mountains. Well, up into the mountains. Up into the foothills. We got up 4 o'clock one morning to go and see Everest. And when we got there, it was still dark. And as it got light, the guide man, he took us in a Land Rover. He said, we're not going to see Everest today, it's covered in cloud. But I'll take you to another viewing point, which was K2. And he said, when you see it, it'll come out of the mist and like a rainbow, only it'll be flat. And he said it'll gradually appear. He said it's 76 miles away, and you'll get a good view of it from here. And sure enough, I couldn't believe it. This mountain, it came out of the mist, and it felt as if you could touch it. It was a massive thing. And I really enjoyed that. I think we crossed the border, I'm not sure, but we went to a Tibetan monastery. That was nice. A big Buddha, and he almost filled the room. Oh, he was a big fat man. Peter was so pleased because it was part of his responsibility. And so he said, if I got permission from Banbury for you to come down to my plant, the plant he was responsible for in South India, that was a place called Cochin. Lovely old city. We've got 1 or 2 problems down there that we'd like you to look at. So I said, well, you'll have to clear it with Banbury and my wife. So anyway, he got clearance and we got on a plane and we flew to Madras. We had a night in Madras, and then we went to Bangalore. We had 2 nights in Bangalore, lovely place. And then we had the pleasure of flying down south over the Western Ghats in the Dakota. That's an old army workhorse plane. And oh, what a journey. Up, down, up, down. You never had we weren't allowed to undo our seatbelts. Anyway, we landed in Cochin, lovely old city. In the state of Kerala, one of the most educated states in India. And they were educated, I think, by Roman Catholics, Portuguese, and in the very first instance. And they've always been kept up their education. So anyway, next morning we had to go into the plant to see what was wrong, and I was introduced to the foreman, and I said, well, what is your problems? And he said, well, my biggest problem is the metal cutting saw. He said, we keep breaking blades, and we just can't understand it. We've shielded it so that it's reasonably safe, he said, but we're not happy with it. So I said, well, you better take me and show me. So he took me and showed me, and it was obvious why they hadn't, I mean, they were intelligent people, but why they hadn't picked it up, I don't know. But the saw was going the wrong way round. And it was cutting this way when it should have been cutting that way. I said, well, have you got an electrician? He brought an electrician. I said, reverse the polarity. So he reversed the polarity, and away it went, and never had any more trouble. I was the king of the man. I was the king of the boss then, you know. And they really looked after me after that. They took me all sorts of places. They took me to a place called Trevundrum, which was a nice city, and they had a big zoo, and they had all sorts in that zoo. And then I went to the Land's End of India. That was 3 weekends running. And then, of course, my time came. I'd had 3 weeks with them, and I'd sorted out quite a few problems for them. And time to catch the Dakota again, and I flew up the coast this time. And that was a bumpy ride to Bombay. And I had 5 days in Bombay waiting for the plane. And I stayed at the Taj Mahal, believe it or not. And they took me all over Bombay, took me to all the sort of tourist spots in Bombay. And the beach is the main thing, because you go down on the beach and the sky is absolutely filled with balloons. The kids spend all their days down on the beach, or they did, flying balloons and kites. It's a good updraft. Then my time came to leave, so there was about 8 of us going on the plane back to England, and then it was down to life with a bump. Had a few days off, and I was back to work. End of Indian story.